Hey there, my name is Chuck Black and welcome to my studio. So a lot of you have been asking me about my larger studio paintings and how I do these incredibly detailed and maybe realistic scenes. So I thought it'd be fun to bring you into this one, which I'm working on right now, and show you how I paint the trees. And I'm going to bring you into these aspen trees and these pine trees and show you how I kind of go about that. So let's get into it. Okay, so this is an acrylic painting and I'm pretty happy with the sky and mountains, and I'm focused on the trees right now. Everything else is just blocked in. I have the idea of a bear and cabin here, but I'm focused on just building these trees up and building the detail up. And so I'm at a point where all I've done is just scrubbed in yellow, then I've taken some orange, scrubbed in orange or red, but I haven't added any detail at all. And this is really easy to get it to this point, but how do we take it to that next level? How do we really make them look real? So I'm going to show you how I go about that. And what I've got here is just yellow, burnt sienna, red, quinacridone red, black, white, and then two different kinds of blue, but probably not going to use the blue as much. So I could take some burnt sienna, maybe some yellow, and I could start pixelating these trees, adding the shadows of these leaves, but that would take a long time. So I can wipe that before it dries. I don't like that method. I could also take a fan brush and I could start doing the same thing. But you still have to spend a lot of time, so what I like to use in a case like this, it's about the right size. And if it was a big tree, this tree up here, I'll probably use a liner brush. I'll be a little more exact because this is a really close object. We want this tree to look very, very highly detailed, realistic. These trees don't need to have as much detail because they're a little bit further back. So I have a natural sponge. You can buy these at most arts and craft stores. I'm going to take this sponge. I'm going to take a liner brush to mix the color I want first. So I'll take some yellow and burnt sienna. And something about right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my finger in some water and I'm just going to wet the sponge down a little bit because that'll help the paint flow a little more. We don't want it overly wet, so I'm just going to do it that way. And then I'll look for a part in the sponge that has some real tiny little specks popping out of it. Some of the sponge just isn't the right texture. So this is a really good part of the sponge. So I'm just going to dip my sponge in the paint. I want paint to kind of get all over that area, pretty lightly though. And I'm just going to tap it on there. You see how much that puts down with such little effort. We instantly have a whole bunch of texture on there. And that's about the right texture that we're looking for. Then what I can do is I can wash this sponge off. Kind of dry it with a napkin over here, and now it's kind of back to what it was. We'll grab our liner brush again. We'll take some white. And some yellow. White and yellow. And I'll grab the same part of the sponge. Just kind of pick up all that white color. And we'll do the same thing. We'll start adding some highlights. And if we want it to be darker, maybe it looks too white in some spots. We can glaze. We can take a very watered down layer, very watered down yellow, and just glaze that over the top. You can see the texture that instantly we start to create. I dip this sponge in water, pat it off well. I'm gonna take my liner brush and we'll grab some red. And grab some yellow. Want it to be about like that. Wash my brush, then we'll take the sponge again. And we'll just kind of sweep it through. And we'll go to the red trees. Now this first layer that we're doing on all these trees oftentimes really won't get you the effect that you're looking for. And so that's why I say we gotta perhaps glaze, or sometimes you just gotta go back over it with a sponge, maybe add some slightly different tones, maybe some in between what we've done, in between the burnt sienna and the highlights, maybe something in between. We could sponge that kind of right in between there. And you can touch it up with a liner brush later on. You can see how we just tap that on. And some of the sponge is shaped in such a way that it's going to create just cool little interesting branches. Just a couple random. That random look will really make your trees appear more real, I think. All right. You can wash that sponge, pat it off again. So that looks a whole lot better already. But I think we can do even better. Let's focus on maybe a darker color. Let's take some black, just add it to the red. Take our sponge, pick that up. All right, and I might even take some more black, get that even darker. And pick up that real dark color. That'll work good for the reds. These shadows on the red trees are going to be a little darker. Yeah, I'm just trying to rotate the sponge, just kind of feeling it up with every tap, how I need to turn it. Some sponges just won't work well. Some sponges have a unique shape that only work for certain things. So not all sponges are going to work precisely for this tree, but you can usually find one that works well. It'll last quite a while. So that's looking pretty good. I'll make sure the sponge is washed. And what we want to do now, so I'll go back to this liner brush and I will take some black to start with. And these tree trunks underneath are going to have shadows. And so we're painting these shadows first. Just going up and down, making the indication of tree trunks, some distant shadows way underneath these trees. Don't worry about it being too dark. because we can glaze or we can always cover it up. It's better to go dark, too dark with the shadows to begin with, because you're always going to have some dark areas, and it's easier to paint these darks first rather than trying to paint the darks over the top when you're finished, because then you can muddy up things. You can ruin things pretty easy with black. So I'll get the black down first, then we don't have to worry about it. Nothing to mess up. And a little bit on these bushes, some shadows down here. This is a pretty fine weave canvas, so you can see a little bit of that texture of the canvas is showing up. Looking for areas I could just kind of darken a little bit. We want to darken that area right through here. Makes this red tree pop out a little more. So this is where I said we could fine tune these trees with the liner brush, but that sponge gave us a pretty good head start. So it's just a lot easier to find something that'll give you a shortcut. Even if it doesn't give you a shortcut to the finish, it gives you a big jump start. I'll wash my brush, and we'll take some yellow, some raw sienna, some black, kind of a greenish tone then. We can start to add the highlights on the pine trees. These aren't very bright highlights, but we'll add highlights over the top of this, so it might be hard to see much at all. But that subtleness is what creates the realism. So I'm not just jumping right to the brightest highlight, I'm building it up slow. Very subtle, and then I'll know when to stop a little bit easier, because if we go little by little, we can kind of compare versus jumping way to the brightest highlight. So we'll add some yellow and white to this mixture now, and that'll brighten the highlight up a little more. We'll just do the same thing. Now these, you'll probably be able to see these highlights a little better. All these trees are just tiny, tiny little textures. And if you put them in the right place, you're going to have a great result. And I don't know if I'm 100% happy with these pine trees yet, but they're coming along. Wash my brush. And now what we'll do is we'll take some white, some cerulean blue, some black. We're going to get a bluish gray. Of course, we want to see some tree trunks on these trees now. I'm just going to start imagining where these tree trunks might be. How many do we want? Don't worry about the tops of these trees because I hide them later. I'm just worried about the tree trunks themselves. It's always a process of going back and forth, going to the leaves to the trunks, the leaves to the trunks, merging the two together, and then eventually you've got something you're happy with. But it can take a while. It is a very long process. But I never spend all day on something like the trees here. I limit myself, and we can always come back to it. But I like to try to wrap them up without doing too much work to them, because sometimes they may not look like you've got much, but once you complete everything else, then they really fit into place. So it's better to leave them a little bit underfinished than going too far. So now I'm looking for other areas. This is all going back to touching up anything we can see. I'm going to take some yellow, a little bit of red and white. I'm going to start just adding some highlights. You can see how that's a lot brighter. Just random spots. And if you don't like the tone, you can always change the tone with a glaze. And I'll show you a little bit. Take some yellow, mix a lot of water in there, super transparent. We can scrub that transparent. You can't see it very well, but you'll start to notice how things become more saturated. We're just adding a thin layer of yellow. And add it up here too. And these trees back here, we want a little more shadow to that. So we're going to take this sponge, we're going to take a dark color again. We're going to add, see how that instantly, just tap it on and you've got all kinds of textures. And that's all we need to do. And that just helps us get it that much further. Yellow, white, red. And just adding subtle textures. Little highlights right here. Very tedious. And you got to do it over and over and over and over again. But if you put all these things in the right places, they'll start to look good. The more you can break up these colors with teeny tiny adjustments, I think the more realistic these trees are going to look. Especially when they're about this distance. And when we talk about merging them together, we take some red, some burnt sienna. Just kind of tap that over the tops of those trunks. See how it kind of just sets them right in. Even do it over here. A little bit right there, a little bit right there. I'm just taking a thicker red and burnt sienna mix, which is going to be a lot richer, dark and rich. I'm going to add some of that to the shadows. Wash my brush. We can take some white, maybe a teeny tiny bit of yellow. Add a couple highlights to these tree trunks. Not too many though, just a few. You don't want as many down below, down here, because our sunlight's kind of coming in. I want to keep that sunlight kind of above that line up in this area. That's just because I decided that. But now maybe we want some bushes to kind of come out. So now we can add features to these trees to begin to kind of make distractions around them, I guess, which will help with making them look real. So we'll take some burnt sienna, some white and yellow. I'm just kind of tapping some foliage. Who knows what kind of colors might be out there. I'm just kind of tapping this. It's kind of a peachy color. That just kind of sets right in, and we can wash that. Okay, so now I'm going to add some yellow, burnt sienna, some white together. I'm going to take our sponge, pick that color up. I'm going to add some more highlights. Some of these bushes, the foliage on the ground, just some random areas. And I can take my finger, I can smear or smudge or remove something if I don't like it. You can see how that just starts to pop up. Alright, now I'm going to add some quinacridone red, mix that into that color, and just pick that color right up with the sponge again. And this is more of a reddish, pinkish. And so this helps kind of blend the bottom of those trunks together. So now these trees are starting to just kind of set those trees back in there. And we can pick up some black on our sponge as well. You can see how we can tap on some shadows. We can adjust them. Just making steps. And right between these two groups of trees, I'm going to add some darker shadows right there. Just putting random texture. Alright. Wash that sponge. And there's one part of the shadows that we added I didn't like right there. Kind of wipe that away. And we'll wash my brush. Now that we have, everything's looking pretty good. But I think we can add maybe some branches. I'm going to take some white and some black. Get some gray. Pretty watered down. You can see how that's just adding some very, very small detailed branches. As the trees start to shed their leaves, now we're seeing a little bit of bare branches. Really simple, just a nice little touch. And I can grab some yellow, wash my brush. I want to pick up some, this color is brilliant yellow green. If we add some yellow to that, it'd be kind of iridescent. I'm just adding a couple more leaves that are maybe sticking out a little far. Just that little pixelated detail, it can go a long ways. So we're just kind of finalizing the tops of these trees. Some of the branches. A couple branches are odd, they stick out further. Yeah, I'm going to grab some black and some burnt sienna. Kind of mix that all together, including the color, this green color, more burnt sienna. We want to break up just a few spots. Maybe we can see a lot further through these trees, through the leaves. There's a couple spots where these shadows just pop through. I want at least a couple spots that kind of give that effect. Wash my brush. And we can grab some yellow. A little bit of red. This is just a nice, rich yellow. A little bit richer than what's on there. And just kind of pixelating it over the top. Just brings out that color even more. Very subtle, but again, all these things start to work together. Details of these trees down here, kind of shadowed. That highlight just isn't quite as bright as over here. Makes them look like they're maybe a little bit further away. And of course, we want to break up some of these shadow areas by putting some of the highlights in with these shadows. I have to get some more red. I'm just going to add red to that mixture, and see, now we're going to just pixelate some of these lighter reds well into these shadows, but not too many. Keep most of it up top. A couple over our branches here. there's a highlight right there. This kind of branch that's popping out extra far right towards us. And maybe another one right there. And don't forget this guy up here. Just a few highlights. Just random textures, but being very cautious, very slow, so we can get a lot of it down. All right, just like that, those trees are beginning to look pretty nice. A couple things maybe I might see is we could mix some red, yellow, and black together. Add just a few more shadows. This is again just about breaking up some of these colors, and these yellows are pretty solid. We can break those up just a little bit. Now it's to the point where I might want to come back to it. Everything is looking pretty good. A couple more details down low. Just little textures. Just kind of blending in, darkening some of these areas by glazing some of this brown. Kind of bringing the attention towards this area up here. But that's pretty much all I do for these trees. And we can take some black and yellow. We can begin to refine some of these other pine trees. Hang some highlights, and going a little darker. Adding some detail with some darker paint. See how that pine tree instantly starts to take shape? Just a little bit of effort. Go right up with some dark color with this one. Just back and forth. Just texture. That tree instantly looks a lot better. That's pretty much all there is to it. And I might take some black and some red, pretty watered down. I'm just gonna pull that over this little indication of trees back here. Just glaze that. As I rub my finger over it, it'll make it more transparent. Just adds a little bit more shadow to this area, brings the focus a little more right there. And some of these trees, we may want the highlights to be a little bit brighter. And to lighten these highlights, what I would do is I would take a white paint. I'm just going to add white. You can see how much brighter that looks. We can take white and go right over the red tree with this white. And I know you're thinking now, well, that's a red tree. Why do you got white on there? Well, if we let it dry, we can glaze it. So let's let this dry, and I'll come back in just a minute or two. Okay, so this part is dry now, and what we're going to do, we're going to take some red, some yellow. I'm gonna get a good mix of kind of a reddish orange. We're gonna scrub that right over the top. It's pretty transparent. I'll use my finger and kind of rub that around. That's kind of the first layer. You can take some more yellow, some water. That is just glazing that color over the top. Wash the brush. We'll take just yellow this time with water. And we'll glaze that right over the top. You can see how just adding that glaze now just takes those whites and it just sets them into the tree, but it's a lot brighter than it was before. Our highlights are looking pretty good. And so overall, our tree line is just about there. The only thing left to do would probably want to add some really dark shadows. This is just solid black. Just adding a few random areas. And I can keep poking at this for a long time, but that, for the most part, is all there is to it. It takes some work, it takes a lot of patience, but it's just a combination of all these little textures placed in the right spots. All right. That's about it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little bit of a bonus insight this week. I might include you in a few more items in this painting before it's over, so stick with us. I got plenty more cool videos to come, and thank you guys so much for your support. Remember, I give away a free hand-signed art print every week to one of my email subscribers, and all you have to do to register to win is click this card right here. Thanks again for watching. Please like, comment, and share, and of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel. We'll see you next time.